You are now listening to the Here for the Truth podcast, hosted by Joel Rafidi and Yerasimos Stilianessis.
Welcome back, everybody. It's episode 22. We got a fucking awesome episode for y'all right now. We have two amazing guests. I'm going to introduce our first guest, Eyla Cuenca. Is that how I pronounce it? Eyla Cuenca. Such a lovely name. Ayla's a dear friend. She's amazing. I'm going to read her bio here. She's a holistic birth guide and doula. She's a mother, gardener, empath. And my favorite part, she loves late 80s garage punk. She stands behind the idea that it is every human's right to have access to empowering education from conception to parenting. Her practice is dedicated to offering guidance that will enable women and men to return to their deepest knowing about birth, parenting, and the body's innate intelligence. Eyla reminds every woman that when it comes to birth and everything else in life, they can have what they envision through first understanding their needs and really getting to know their options. Her approach is rooted in evidence-based information and informed by both ancient traditions and her intuitive Reiki practice. She studied anthropology and ethnographic photography at Bennington College. After years of farming, teaching, and working commercial photography, she trained as a birth doula, birth educator, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, placentophagy specialist? Placentophagy specialist. She currently lives in Miami, Florida. Alyssa, welcome so much to Here for the Truth.
You mean Eyla?
Eyla.
Oh God, I literally do this all. I feel like I've done this before. Ayla, welcome to Here for the Truth.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah.
And today, for the first episode ever, we have two amazing special guests. So we have Alyssa in the house today as well. Alyssa is a former professional dancer of over 20 years. She has owned her own dance studio for 6 years, has mentored thousands of aspiring dancers along the way. And after experiencing her first home birth to her daughter, Valley Grace, Alyssa became inspired and fell in love with the process of natural birth. She's since trained to become a certified birth doula and is dedicated to empowering women about natural birth and healing birth trauma, which she believes is the primary blockage to women knowing and understanding their full potential when it comes to stepping into motherhood. She's the founder of the organic mother and baby balm and remedy range Mindful and Home, and she spends her time focusing on loving and nurturing her own young family holistically and raising her daughters as consciously as she can. And for full transparency, Alyssa is my amazing wife.
Oh,
Alyssa.
shit. I didn't know that.
Hi.
Hi. Ladies, thank you both so much for being here. This is an episode that we're really excited to have. And I think this is the most important conversation. And the work that you're both doing is of utmost importance, particularly during this time. There is nothing more essential than what you're both offering. So I don't know where we're gonna start this one. There's a lot to unpack.
There is. Real quick, I just want to give a shout out to everyone watching this, to all our patrons too. The first episode, the first half of the episode will be available to the public, and the second half of the episode will be available to our patrons, our members. Okay. So, but we got a lot we're gonna talk about this episode. I'm really excited.
Yeah. Let's kick it off on a basic level, I guess. Eyla, why is empowerment around birth, understanding birth, the natural processes, why is this knowledge so potent and so important?
Yeah, so we're in a time right now, and we have been for a while, where other people are dictating the narrative of how we are bringing children into the world. And that entire structure is disempowering in itself. And I see that, and I have seen that over time through studying anthropology, how that can sort of leak and filter into other areas of our lives and essentially kind of create this ripple effect of disempowerment throughout child rearing, throughout an individual just seeking out their own desires in their path of life, in their walk of life. So it really begins in that birthing process. So that's, I find right now, especially in the time we're in, it's so essential to understand that really is your body and your choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It really is the beginning and the foundations of, I mean, it sets the tone, and I guess the initial blueprint for everything that we experience in life going forward. To some extent, we're always feeling the consequences of, you know what I mean, our birth experience, you know.
Yeah.
Alyssa, any commentary on that?
I love to say that peace on earth starts at birth. So it's so essential to have, to stand in your power, to know what's going on, to know what's happening, understanding the process of birth, so that you can step into your full power as a mother, but also as a baby and as a child going through life and growing up. So yeah, I think it's really important to understand natural processes, understanding how your body works, but also coming back to that place where you trust yourself, because along the way, so many conditions and so much conditioning has led you further and further away from yourself. So coming back to that and, you know, breaking down all the walls to understand yourself, to understand your true potential and your true power is so important, as well as stepping into motherhood down the line as well, and how you raise your family, because now more than ever, we don't have a choice, you know, and this is where our children are going to learn how powerful their mother was and how powerful their family was, you know, to give them a voice later down the track, not to just succumb to all of this pretty much bullshit that's going on right now. So definitely, yeah, super important. The way you're born and the way a mom gives birth is essential. It's one of the most important things, I would have to say, in life.
I love your statement, peace on earth starts at birth, you know, and I'm sure maybe we'll get into our own personal stories, you know, during this whole process, but I'm just gonna drop something real quickly. Is just, again, I had a really traumatic birth, so it took me time to gain more peace in my life, you know, and I'm sure that that foundational experience that wasn't, let's say, ideal, had an impact. But I'm really curious to continue that discussion there. I guess one question that I want to start with is, and hopefully, you know, you have the answer, or I don't know, is just like, where did we go wrong? Like, when was this like shift? Obviously there's like the whole movement away from like natural health to like the allopathic system, et cetera, but like, where in regards to like the birthing experience was there this big shift and turn towards, you know, where we are right now? And anyone can jump in.
I might say probably around the 1500s when we began medicalizing birth. The first C-section was reported to be around that time. And it was kind of like this idea that we could go against what is the greater design, and how human life unfolds. So it was this idea that birth was now under the umbrella of what is medicine and science. And I don't think that that's true. I don't agree. And so from there, it just progressed, you know, and eventually we got to the 1890s where birth was fully medicalized. And then the 1940s when basically 90% of women were giving birth in hospitals. And that was really the way to control the narrative. You know, once a woman gives birth in a hospital, you basically have your cash cow for life, which is a traumatized mother who's been potentially emotionally, psychologically, and physically injured, and a child who has also been emotionally, psychologically, and physically injured. So there you have your customer. And so the pharmaceutical industry really took hold, I'd say probably in the 1800s, but it was leading up to that for a few centuries before.
Yeah. It's crazy to think that, you know, but it makes perfect sense that these powers at be, or whatever they are, you mean, would have an intent to hijack the most natural process possible. You know what I mean? Literally the transition from divinity into this physical human experience that we're having, and for that to be co-opted in the way it has been, and for us to really step back and look at the stark reality of what's taking place around literally us being born from the divine, from the cosmos, from wherever we come from into this realm, it's sickening to think about. And I mean, obviously they're trying to clamp down even further and further on that process. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Alyssa, why did you decide to embark on this path? Like what's like your story? In your bio you talked about being a dancer, but what really drew you towards wanting to work in the realm of natural birth, etc.?
Well, I think I'm naturally a person that likes to think for themselves. I'm very, stubborn in that way. I like to make my own decisions.
Manifester, human design.
I am a manifester. And definitely, I rarely thought about birth before I was pregnant myself. So Joel and I have always been on this a holistic path and always looked after ourselves and things like that. So when it came to this, I wanted to understand how everything worked. So it just became a natural process for me. And when I thought about it, I was like, oh, like I usually try to stay away from hospitals and I don't feel comfortable there. So where do I want to give birth? And it was in our room, in our house. So that was just a natural instinct for me. And I think going back to what we were saying before, how it's become industrialized, and what I found at our first appointment was it was so clinical. And so you have to get a blood test to confirm you're pregnant. So what it had on my form was disease. And then it said pregnant under it. And I was like, okay, that doesn't make sense to me. This is a beautiful experience. I'm pregnant. I'm bringing life into this world. And so it was just like there was no emotion. The doctor that gave me the blood test tried to scare me and fear me, as well as everyone else projecting their stuff onto me. So naturally, I aligned myself with people that made sense to me. So they were private midwives. They were people that had lived the experience that I wanted to have in this. We hired a doula. We did birth training, all of that type of stuff. And when I realized this was the path, it just flowed naturally for me. I think with my first birth experience, I had a 36-hour active labor home birth. And so we decided to, for precaution, transfer to the hospital. And I now understand that I had to have this experience to be able to give and see the polarities of a home birth compared to a hospital birth. So I was given a time frame immediately as I walked in. I was put on my back. They had already put a drip into me without my consent. And it was just a spiral. Luckily, I knew what I was talking about and I knew what I was advocating for, and that was myself and for my baby. Because in an instant, I would have been drugged up and given a caesarean, and that would have been the end of it. But I really did have to negotiate. It was a battlefield. And, I can completely see how those experiences can traumatize someone when they don't understand what's happening to them, or they're told this or they're told that, because people just blatantly give their trust up to these people that are seen as superior to us. When my whole power was given over to those people, they didn't know better than I did. So yeah, I ended up getting away with very minimal intervention. What I did receive was, and because I was completely undrugged and a completely natural birth, I decided to fight for that. They cut me. So I had an episiotomy to get my baby out. And I felt every single bit of it. And that was the time I was in pain. That was the time I yelled hysterically when they told me, no, you can't make any noise, be quiet. So it was traumatic in that sense for me. And I walked away pretty unscathed, to be honest, compared to what other people go through. And one image I still remember in the corner was the obstetrician that was paired with me, telling all of the midwives around her that I'm the boss here. She needs to listen to me. So it was very clear then and there that, how people can fall into the trap and all of that. So luckily we knew what we were talking about, Joel and I, but after that, you know, I was surrounded by so many amazing women. My doula, luckily my midwives could still be with me, and those people supported me. Those people loved me the way that I needed to be loved. They nurtured me. And that, I'm going to cry because it's just such a profound experience. And that was what I wanted to give to someone else, because not many people get the opportunity that I do. So that's why I'm on this path. That's why I'm here, to give that to someone else, for families, for mothers, for babies. And yeah.
We're all
now I'm
crying
getting
now.
emotional.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
yeah,
what, I
that's
mean,
my story.
you know, what's more vulnerable, you know, than even just this topic and children and childbirth. And so like, I'm fuck, you know,
Yeah,
It's-
got me too.
yeah, it's beautiful.
What I
Thank you. Oh no, Joel, go.
No, of course. Thank you for sharing and being so vulnerable. And I know like how important and significant that story is to you. So yeah, what is it? What are we currently experiencing, and what are the primary factors that are inhibiting so much fear into women around birth, and that are disempowering them so much? What are they experiencing growing up? What are the little things that make them so scared when they finally get to pregnancy to actually give birth, Eyla?
Well, I always start out by saying it's our birth education, which is primarily Hollywood, right? So we have this idea that birth is dangerous, it's an emergency, and it's something that we want to get through as quickly as possible, because like you just want the baby. You don't want to deal with what's in between. So that's why we often see depicted in films where the woman's water breaks, and then next thing you know, she's rushing in the car and screaming, and then she gets there, and as soon as she gets her epidural or whatever it is she's getting a drip with, everything's fine, and then we cut to a newborn baby. You know, so that's the idea that we have. And there's also a huge lack of education around the woman's body in general growing up. There's a lot of shame kind of enshrouded in the process of a woman getting her menstruation. And, you know, it's like, I've heard so many stories over the years in my work of women saying like, oh, I remember getting my period and my mother getting upset with me, or I remember going to school and then leaking through my skirt or my pants and getting made fun of, you know. So there's just this general idea that what the woman's body produces is somehow unwanted or should be kept to the side or undercover, and it should be gotten through as quickly as possible. And then you compound that with horror stories that you hear from friends and family, or I know someone or someone's cousin had this C-section because of this. And so we're just kind of like walking around with this entire weight of our own personal experience and shame with everyone else's story.
Yeah, stories are super important, because I mean, in ancient times, it was those stories, that mythology, those little tales that were told around the campfire that would actually build our capacity for what we thought we could, do going forward, and what we knew they were capable of. But now we live in a time where these stories are so disempowering, you know, so it's almost like they've hijacked the mythology and the stories around these concepts in order to perpetuate what's going on now.
Yeah, hijack the mythology. Yeah.
So yeah, let's just flip it to you, Eyla, in terms of like your story. You know, what's been your hero's journey, heroine's journey, person's journey, whatever, around, you know, where you are now?
Wow. I feel like I've had 9 lives. But I'll just go specifically to the one where I gave birth to my daughter. So for me, the process of being pregnant was actually kind of similar to you, Alyssa. When I found out I was pregnant, I went to a doctor here because my husband at the time was like, we need to, you know, see an OB. I guess this one, I found him on Yelp. He's pretty good. And I was like, I don't know. I'm like, I know a few midwives, like, I'm not really sure, but it was his comfort level at the time. And I remember going to the appointment and he just took one look at me and was like, yeah, you're quite small, you have a small frame, and I would just be open to the fact that you most likely will be having a C-section, and that was the first thing that I heard walking into the office. So immediately, of course, I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing this with you. And we found a midwife, and I went through this self-discovery. So even though I was working with women at the time and offering support, it hadn't really personalized for me yet. And so going through the actual labor process, I went into labor 10 days after my due date, and I induced my own labor because I was just so keen on not going to the hospital. And in the state of Florida, you have to technically be transferred over to OB care after 10 days after your due date if you don't go into labor spontaneously. So I was doing everything I could. And I was in labor from Friday until Sunday afternoon when she was finally born. And for me, it was just the death of my former self was really the experience that I went through. And I woke up basically when she was born. I felt like I woke up and I was a new person, and I was in this new dimension with this being and with my family. And so that was when I realized, like, this is something that I need to at least create a pathway for other women to access in whatever way. Not the same story at all, but how can I just open a doorway for them to walk through or to explore? And so it was such a positive, beautiful experience, and I wouldn't change a single thing about it. I wouldn't change, having a 2nd-degree tear, and I wouldn't change anything about the experience. And thereafter, the many years of breastfeeding for 5 years was such a journey, such a labor of love. And I think that was something that really defined, just within my own being, just really defined a lot about my character that I didn't know. I hadn't yet known about myself. And so through this process, I've just been whatever I acquire through motherhood and through this kind of field work that I'm doing, I just give back to the women around me through my work. And I really feel like Alyssa and other women in this work, like, I really do feel that these souls of these babies are finding us, and they're actually guiding their parents to find us, to assist them through this process, because it's really wild in this 3D plane. And I think these souls know that, and they really want their parents to be able to gain perspective and have that experience you had of being held. So yeah, it's my journey with the birth and how I arrived here.
It's amazing.
Yeah. What are the long-term ramifications of a C-section? Open to either of you.
Well, a lot of women are induced, and then I'm a big advocate for allowing baby to come on their own terms, in their own time, entering this earth and when they're ready. So I think induction and then leading possibly to a cesarean, most of the time it's because of an induction and the spiral of intervention that leads to it. It's just kind of disrupted the whole system. If the baby doesn't come through the birth canal, there are different triggers and different hormones, different bacterias and things that a baby gets wiped with as they exit the birth canal. So it triggers a bonding with mother. But not only that, the baby is highly drugged as well in the whole process, whether or not that's an epidural and stuff. So you've got a groggy mother who misses out on that beautiful experience, understanding how powerful her body is at that time. And obviously cesarean is necessary in those very rare emergencies, but it seems like these days everything is made an emergency, and so the cesarean rate is very, very high. And yeah, the bonding is disrupted. If you don't have proper support after having a cesarean, you may have proper problems breastfeeding, and then again, that's the mum couldn't give birth naturally, so oh, I can't feed and nourish my baby either. But it's not the mother's fault. You know, the mother didn't fail her baby and herself. It's the system that failed her. She didn't receive the proper care. She didn't understand, wasn't educated on the proper processes around how birth works and how your body is designed to keep up with the intense sensations, and all of the influx of hormones are all necessary. So you're missing out on quite a bit if you do have a cesarean section. Not only is the recovery and the healing a very, very tough journey. I'm sure that I haven't had that experience, but I've heard a lot of things. Infection, it can lead to a whole myriad of other things that you shouldn't be dealing with after a beautiful experience and euphoric feeling after birth. So it does impact a lot of the natural process.
So I'm curious, I was born a month premature. I was born through emergency C-section. And the story that I got is that the doctor at the time told my mom that she shouldn't breastfeed me, but maybe potentially she couldn't as well. Is that you're saying, like, if you're born through a C-section, there's a possibility that like you're not able to breastfeed your child? Is that what you're saying? Or did I miss that? Or
yeah,
anyone could
Eyla?
jump in.
Eyla?
Yeah, so it's possible. It's possible for a few reasons. Like she mentioned just now, when the baby passes through the birth canal, there's basically a biofeedback loop that happens, and the body knows that now there's a baby and it's going to go into the next phase of milk production. So although your mind knows you've had a baby, the animal body may not have registered that in the same way. And so sometimes milk doesn't come in. Then the other portion of that is because you are separated from the baby for a significant amount of time after the cesarean, you don't have the body contact, you're not within that really essential 1 hour window where you do all of the chemical skin imprinting. Sometimes mothers kind of they pass that threshold, and then they don't feel that deep desire to reunite with the baby. So sometimes hours can go by. And some women feel disconnected. Clients of mine in the past have said, I feel like shit. I don't want to hold my baby. I don't really want to touch my baby, and they feel guilty. So it could be a combination of things, but really it's the separation that happens, and you're coming off of a high amount of fentanyl and lidocaine from the epidural. Women are vomiting. Nurses are doing different procedures so that air is not getting trapped inside of the abdomen of the mother after the C-section. And so it's not really a time to be breastfeeding or bonding with the baby. The woman's body is in shock. It's a major abdominal surgery. So I have seen women successfully breastfeed after cesarean, and it just requires a different type of support and really a lot of gumption, I would say.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. I hadn't heard that described in that way. And another thing that I'd heard often is that, I guess at a certain period of time, like they were really pushing formula. And so where they were telling moms not to breastfeed so they can use formula, just like, I guess you would say how MDs would push pharmaceuticals over other alternatives. So was that a thing that happened or went on during a certain period? We always have these things historically with the medical industry where it's like during the 80s or during the 90s, was what was going on.
So yeah, it's kind of layered, and I don't know what it was like in Australia. I imagine similar to the US, but basically in the 40s, there were all these advertisements that were like, oh, have your baby in the hospital. You can feel no pain, right? You would just get nitrous gas or even general anesthesia, feel no pain. Then your baby gets cleaned up and taken care of for you. We'll feed it formula. You can rest and recover, and then you can go home completely happy with this baby who's already been settled. And so they were really pushing this idea that you were going to like a 5-star resort to have your baby, and they would just take care of it all. So that really started happening in the 40s. And that was when a lot of hospitals were being developed by pharmaceutical companies. And so it was just basically a way for them to funnel everything that they were producing. And what better way than to funnel it through women who were having babies every single day across America. And then in the 80s, it was kind of like the working mother thing and feminism, where it was like, I'm still going to go to work. I'm still going to function in this way. And what a great thing I have formula where someone else can take care of my baby. My baby can go to daycare. You know, there were all these layers, sociocultural layers that were also emerging in the 70s and 80s. A lot of kids that were born in the 80s didn't breastfeed. Like it was really, really common to formula feed.
Wow.
I wasn't breastfed. Yeah. I wasn't breastfed, everything I said before too, emergency C-section, premature. So, I'm really happy having this conversation. It's, I wouldn't say it's triggering me, but like, I'm this like passionate Greek guy. So like, it gets me fucking angry too. And obviously anyone who knows me and the things that I speak about and talk about, like, this is just a subject that like, I don't know, I'm passionate about with the level of knowledge I have. I'm so blessed and honored that we're able to have both of you on here to give your perspectives. And I'm also curious, like the differences between Australia and the US in terms of like hospital births or giving birth. Like what's the zeitgeist in Australia versus the US? Like what are the similarities? What are the differences? Alyssa, if you want to comment on that, or Eyla, if there are any.
Yeah, well, I think it's the same as what Eyla is describing here. Just the right support is not available to women in breastfeeding. It's as simple as a proper latch, as well as the connection to mother and baby. But we're not taught that. We're not shown that. I mean, I'm sure some people understand that. But what I found along the way as well is that women, when they're younger, they're not told about the importance of keeping your natural breasts and not mucking with the system. So a lot of people have breast surgery, whether or not it's for, looks and all of that stuff, or, necessary surgery to improve your health. I just think that they're butchered. So if they had have known that this could affect their feeding journey later, they wouldn't have done it. But we're not educating young women. We're not educating women and young girls about the importance of nutrition and the benefits of breastfeeding before they make those important decisions. So I think, breastfeeding is second to none. Breast milk is designed for your baby, antibodies, immunity, absolutely everything. So if women knew that, they wouldn't be just settling for formula. I feel like every woman can breastfeed, and it's just being shown the way and having the right support. But when you've got convenience over, natural, everyone takes convenience if they don't know any better. And if the doctor that's prescribing this for you, oh, you can just do whatever you want, calm your baby off. It takes work. It takes commitment. To settle your baby, to nurture your baby. So I think everything that Eyla said to do with the US, but also I've noticed that in Australia is, breast surgery has really affected the way people breastfeed, and information around that should be provided also to young girls.
I think one thing that's really popping up for me here now is like, how did they manipulate us, and I guess primarily women, to believe that returning to their normal life as quickly as possible takes precedent over the work of actually now stepping into motherhood and being a mother? Like, how did they make them believe that going to work was more primary than the real work that they're being called to do after having birth as a human being,
Yeah, I think it's like the psy-op of feminism, just completely. That was one of the main players in dismantling the nuclear family and polarizing women into the masculine energy. So
inversion, huh?
What do you say, Joel?
Inversion.
Yeah. Upside down world.
Yeah, man.
So real quickly, what do you think about the term birthing person? Since we might as well continue from the psy-op of feminism to the complete alteration of English language and how we refer to women. Where are the feminists there,
there's so many iterations of feminism. Like, remember maybe 6 years ago, getting into some sort of debate, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, with someone, because they were saying that it's that I was at home, like with the ball and chain, that breastfeeding was like a ball and chain, and that I had, like, my identity and my independence as a woman had been usurped by this basically control mechanism, which was a child, which is something that, like, the patriarchy has convinced me I'm supposed to do, is birth children, right? And I was like, well, I actually just think that I'm an empowered, like, for me, this is feminist to decide to stay home and not participate in the patriarchy. Like, for me, this is feminism, to decide that I'm going to raise a child that's going to make a difference in the world, and I'm not going to give someone else in a room, I'm not going to give it up to a room full of 20 kids crawling around just so that I can go out and have a mediocre job. Like, I don't, for me, that's not empowerment. And so I think it's just so different for everyone. And I still use the term birthing woman. Women give birth, and it's, for me, it's this, want to have your cake and eat it too, right? When it's convenient for you, you're a man. When it's convenient for you, you're a woman. I don't think that it's really fair to women to remove that title from them. Only a woman can give birth. And so when I'm in these birthing rooms and midwives are saying, oh, the birthing person, or I'm like, what else are you going to take from us?
Mhm.
Like, what else? This is uniquely ours.
Yeah.
So it's a loaded topic, but it's a strange time we're in.
Yeah.
When it comes to that.
Definitely.
Alyssa, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about the fact that Eyla has a little girl, and Joel and I have 2 little girls. So the importance of, strong women, educated women, empowered women raising the future generation of girls who will one day be birthing women and empowered mothers. And I think that's super important, to normalize birth and to set them up for the future so that they raise their children, the way nature intended it also. So I think it's a very important role to have the mother well, and the mother not traumatized, and the mother looked after, because
Right.
very often we're told, oh, the baby's here now, so you kind of don't matter anymore. But when you hold the mother, and when you nurture the mother, and the mother is in touch with themselves and in tune with themselves and nurtures themselves, so self-love, self-worth, then your
Right.
whole family thrives. So I think the system is really designed by separating mother and baby, separating families, and surrounding birth in the home. It's designed to create disconnect right from the very beginning. So if women knew that and understood how the processes work, and we could keep it intact for our future generations, then it's just going to change the world. So I think it's super important that we have strong, nurtured mothers and women.
Yeah, and to that end, removing the title of girl from your child's vocabulary is like, you're basically conditioning them for self-rejection and self-hate, right? Why do I have these parts? Why, like, you don't want to celebrate. Like, it's like an encouragement not to celebrate the way that they were born. And it's and that, like, that has resounding effects on their ability to interact with the world, to create relationship with others, when there is that self-hate that's being nurtured and encouraged by society.
Yeah,
for men and women.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, in my view, self-hatred and self-masochism is at the root of everything that we're experiencing right now. You know what I mean? And that's why we're able to be manipulated, controlled, and coerced to such a degree, because without that self-love, we're not even comfortable within ourselves. We're just looking for any Tom, Dick, and Harry to tell us who we are. If it's even coming down to the most basic form of gender now, right? We're looking for that elsewhere. It's like, it's absolute insanity.
Trust the experts, bro.
Trust the experts, man.
Trust the experts.
Well, what did I received a message actually the other day. How dare you be encouraging people to think for themselves? How dare you encourage people to do their own research? And I was like, but we all have been given our own brain to make our own decisions. So at what point do you stop trusting yourself, stop listening to yourself, and outsourcing absolutely everything to everyone? This is what we're seeing on a mass scale, even right now, what's happening in the world. But it starts, you know, for girls and even men to be empowered around birth for that very reason, you know. So how dare I encourage someone to think for themselves? But like, it blows my mind to receive that message.
Oh yeah, no,
And that's what's happening.
I see men walk into the birth room and they lose, like the hospital, for example, and they lose all authority. It's like their dick just disappears, you know, and they, yes, doctor, whatever you say, like bow down to mommy medicine. And in that moment, the woman is like, hey, you're supposed to be here as gatekeeper. And I've seen so many women in postpartum express resentment and feeling like they weren't supported by their husbands or their partners in that moment. Yeah. And people wonder why so many relationships and marriages crumble after birth. It's not because you have a third party in the house. It's because there was a telling moment, right? When it really mattered.
Yeah.
Is the woman supported? Is she being held? Can she really trust this person to protect her? And I've seen it happen often. No, the answer is no. And so men really do have to be informed and educated about this process if they're going to walk into the lion's den, which is the hospital.
Mm-hmm. You got to be informed, you know. You got to be informed in that regard.
And I mean, it's the one thing that men just want to run away from and shy away from. It's one thing where men are thinking, oh, I've got enough responsibilities. I don't need to take responsibility when it comes to, you know what I mean, the birth of my child and what my wife is experiencing. I don't need to inform myself and educate myself around that. I know men that go to the hospital birth and they want to get on the gas. You know what I mean? Like they want the gas the same way the woman does. Like, what the fuck is that all about? You know, like that's sickening to me. One thing we experienced in our birth was once our baby was born, and because they labeled it a traumatic birth or whatever, and they wanted to, you know what I mean, to take Valley, our daughter, and just run some tests or whatever. And then they pressured me on that point to try give her, you mean, the first couple doses of the vaccine. And I said, absolutely, there's no way that that's taking place whatsoever, you know. And what they did from that point was they went to Alyssa, because we were in separate rooms now. I was with Valley. They went to Alyssa and said, your husband's being negligible. And they tried to play us against each other, right? Like how insane is that? And they said, we recommend that you do this. They didn't even accept my word, accept my stance in my power. They went to go to my wife to try and say, now your husband's being negligible. We recommend this. Like, it's, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And at a woman's, a most vulnerable time.
Yeah.
You know, a mother is, well, meanwhile, I'm just being stitched up on the table. You know, they're talking to me about injecting my child and going against what my husband says. But, you know, as a family, we knew where we stood. No one could break us, but it's going into that lion's den prepared. We were very prepared. I feel Joel and I were on the same page, but a lot of people don't have that. It's a luxury these days. It is a luxury. And so that's why we inform people around that, the terms to use, and you don't want to portray yourself as being negligible at all. You know, you're not refusing, but you're making different decisions and for a later time, you know?
Yep.
So, yeah.
That's what I tell all my clients. Just say, yeah, I'll do it at the pediatrician's office. Yeah. Oh no, totally. I know. We're going to go tomorrow. It's like, it's just this like sick game of manipulation that you have to navigate. And who should be doing that at their birth?
Yeah.
And what, Joel, you could go.
I was going to say this is a good place to end the first half. Thank you to our public audience for listening. On the second part of this episode, we're going to get into the scamdemic, how that's affected birth processes. We're going to get far deeper into vaccines, and let's start providing some empowering solutions as to how women can actually step into their power and recognize their innate power. And for any woman that's thinking about getting pregnant, having baby, how they can do that empowered during this time. Guys, thanks for listening to Here for the Truth. To our patrons, we'll see you in a bit. All right, so our patrons and members, welcome back to the second half of this episode of Here for the Truth, where we're having an incredible discussion about the importance of natural birth and empowering women and owning the rite of passage that is birth, and for men as well. That's an experience for them too, you know. It's obviously a crazy time in the world right now with this scamdemic that's been taking place. How, in your opinion, Eyla, has that affected the birth processes?
So actually, I've noticed since March 2020, this influx of women and couples who would have never considered birthing out of the hospital suddenly wanting to birth out of the hospital. And so for me, it was this instant kind of like infusion of empowerment and opportunity for a serious pivot. So I just dove right into that, you know, and it was this opportunity that I saw for a lot of more conventional women, you know, women who are conventionally minded, not that that's like better or worse in any way. It's just, they're in a conventional field, and for them to open up to this possibility was like so exciting for me, to be able to build whatever type of bridge they needed to step into this new space. So I saw that on a personal level in a big way, and it's continuing now. Even though I always feel like we're in the start of the pandemic. Like every week, I'm like, this is just the beginning, you know. Yeah. And you know, on the larger scale, I have seen it kind of shift more people into fear generally. Of course, that's the energy that we're in, right? This fear matrix. So I have seen a lot of women also become a little bit more, I don't know, anxious, a lot of more, you know, more preterm labors. I've definitely seen a lot more preterm labors, women going into labor early before their due date, high blood pressure, a lot of stress. Clients of mine, students of mine who've chosen to vaccinate themselves while pregnant, a few of them have actually lost the pregnancies. So I have seen this other side emerging, and it's been wild.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. That's something we talk about often, and what we're noticing in all fields is that what this has done is it's either presented people with an opportunity to step into more of an organic timeline, step deeper into authenticity and integrity, and listen and tune in to themselves. And for others, it's pushed them even further out into the fear paradigm, you know. So it's interesting that it works both ways. You know what I mean? Simultaneously. Melissa, any commentary?
Yeah, I'd have to say the same. You're seeing the split in this area as well, with women and the fear of being alone and unsupported. Up until recently, you weren't even allowed to have your partner in the birthing unit with you. So women are doing it on their own. They're separated from their other children. Their families are so disconnected. And it really plays a big part on how women recover and all of that. But I'm definitely seeing a lot more women also stepping into their power or asking questions. There must be a better way. There has to be a different way. So yes, that's where my work has lied recently, is talking about home birth and sharing my story and things like that, so that women can make those informed decisions for themselves and their families. So you're seeing the fear, and you're seeing the women really step up and making those changes, which is a positive thing as well.
Yeah. And I mean, just the whole concept of isolation, right? Like, how does that play into like a birth? You know, like are women being separated from their babies because of coronavirus at birth? Is there any protocol that takes place in the hospital in that regard, or?
Yeah, that was actually happening here in the US, where if the woman tested positive for the virus, Sorry, if
Yeah,
she
no.
tested positive, I'm just like,
She tested positive.
Yeah.
my daughter goes like this, the virus. She's so funny, man. So yeah, when they would test positive for the virus, they would then have their baby taken away from them immediately after the birth, and the baby would be isolated and observed. Right?
Wow.
Like, I don't know who designed that system or what they were really looking for. So I had somehow produced, someone sent this to me. It was like an attorney randomly fell out of the heavens and sent this to me on Instagram and said, I want you to share this with as many people as possible. And it was just paperwork that basically stated under the law here in the US that, you know, I assume full responsibility for whatever happens for me keeping contact with my baby, even though I am coronavirus positive. And so I just started, people were contacting me by the hundreds, and I was just emailing this out to everyone, and they were just taking it with them to the hospital and using it. And that was last August, actually, it was when that was really, really happening. And I think now it's shifted a little bit. As far as the protocol, I think now women are not wearing masks in some of the hospitals while they're birthing. Like that's shifted recently. When you arrive at the hospital, you have to take your test in the hospital, and your husband has to wait outside until the results come back. If you test positive, he cannot come in with you. Things like that, you know. So that's what's kind of like going down right now. I was recently banned from one of the hospitals here, but I just like can't keep my mouth shut anymore. And I go wild. So it's okay. Cause I was calling in last year. I was saying like, I don't want to do hospital births anymore. Yeah. It's been too many years. And the universe is like, okay, you're going to go out with a bang. So I've just been like, yeah.
Nice.
Remember, was it last year, that video that went viral of like the woman giving birth? And then there was like, she was wearing a mask and a visor, and there was like saran wrap or something. What was that?
Yeah.
Oh, C-section, I think, right?
Is that what that was? Like, I don't know what was going on, but it just felt like it was
with the country music playing in the background.
Maybe it just felt like it was like from some dystopian like Hollywood movie. Like I just felt like how far away are we removed from the natural connection? And I can only imagine, what does that do to a child that needs to connect and see their mother's face and observe body language even at that age? Like what's going on? Like how does that impact mother-child relationship by being removed so quickly, by not even being able to like see her face, by not being able to have that skin to skin contact? Like what are the repercussions of that?
Alyssa.
We do ping pong back and forth.
Yeah, definitely. Like a baby's nervous system is very reliant on the mother. You need to have them close at all times. Not only that, they regulate their emotions and they learn about the world and the safety of the world by their mother and their father's expressions. So when they're not getting that closeness, when they're not smelling the mother, when they're not drinking breast milk, you know, they're lost. They're lost. And that connection from birth has just been, you know, destroyed. I think it can be repaired if the work is done. But yeah, it's especially, I'm seeing it a lot in children, even with masks everywhere. You know, there are kids that just don't know what's going on. There's people with glasses on and face masks, and, you know, they don't understand what's happening. No one can smile. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's really a crazy world out there. What are we teaching our children about? I always make it a point to share a smile. And yeah, Joel and I have decided that it's just not on in our household, you know, and we explain to our children what's actually going on so that they understand this is not a normal thing. So I think that, yeah, if more people were aware of the detrimental effects to their children, a newborn, you know, they're just constantly looking. That's what a baby does. That's what they're designed to do. You're their safety. You know, if they're not getting that, what's missing?
Yeah, I mean, I have a history. I have hearing issues, so I think I've kind of learned to like look at people's like lips like naturally, and you know, being around people wearing masks is just such a weird thing for me. and I'm a grown man. I can only imagine like children from, age 0 to 7 in really important developmental stages. Like, how are they developing? Like they can't read the facial cues. How do they build empathy? Like I'm so curious. Well, I mean, I have my own opinions, but I'm curious to think, like, to hear what you both have to say, like 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Like, what do you think are the potential repercussions of children during these really important developmental stages in their life for a couple of years? One, living in extreme fear, depending on, of course, coming from their parents, and society, but two, like being masked up on a regular basis. Like, what do you think? Is there anything, or is it just, yeah.
So, like, what I'm observing is that this is just kind of an extension of the epidemic of technology that's integrated into children's lives. There's already been this rift for so many years. And so for me, this may or may not really be affecting the age group of like 8 to 18 as much as we think that it is. Maybe that's naive of me to say. What I am noticing is that a child, 0 to 7, who has not been inundated with technology, who's not been completely tainted by our social structures, is relying, like any animal relies. It relies on looking at the mouth to understand where it stands with the other animal, right? That's how animals can gauge dominance and submission, is really through eye contact and also through the mouth and the teeth. That's how they can assess danger and learning how to read the animal body. So I think I'm not a behavioral psychologist, but I think that ages 0 to 7 are being heavily affected by that. And like you guys, I've made such a point that in my household that this is not normal. It's not even a thing. It's not like she's never worn a mask. I don't wear a mask. Like, I've taught her everything that I'm teaching myself in this process. And she's vocal about it, and I think that's all that we really can do. Like, she's like gone up to bat for me in public when people have said things to me, about mask wearing and going into certain spaces without a mask. And like, she'll definitely call it out, and people are, shocked. But I think that's the kind of, for me, that's important. That's part of her finding her voice, and she knows it's not normal. And when if you look at Dr. Tronick's work, he does the still face experiment. He did a lot of experiments and studies throughout the 80s, 90s, where children, their nervous system, like you said, would go into the sympathetic very quickly when their mother wouldn't make eye contact with them, or when she would cover her mouth or only show half of her face. And children ages like 18 months to 3.5, which was his main age group of study, they would do all of these things, like jump through hoops, like act as court jester to try to get the mother to respond. And when they couldn't see her mouth, they would go into like complete survival mode. And as soon as she would reveal her mouth, they would like their body language would change, they would disarm, and they would completely calm down. And so if we just look at that work, I think it's pretty synonymous with what's going on right now, and it's undeniable.
Yeah.
So yeah, Dr. Tronick's work, really worth looking at.
Cool.
Well, I've just seen overnight, especially in New South Wales, they've mandated masks at schools. So when children return in October, all students have to wear masks.
This is primary school as well,
This
by the way.
primary school. So young children, it's just so, I just can't help, but obviously our children aren't in school. We had decided long before this that we would homeschool our children. If not had made a decision then, it is definite now. And I've seen a lot of people pull their families out of school as well because of this. It's just not a normal thing. And I'm so glad so many people are standing up, because you go to school, you create friendships, and then every school holidays here in Australia, you're isolated again. So it's like very confusing. I couldn't imagine being a child at this time. I'm trying to, especially with Valley, she's very aware for a nearly 3-year-old. So she asks questions. So I'm gauging what she's learning from this. And she's just like, Mummy, they're wearing a mask. And it's like, she finds that weird also. So what's it doing to school? You know, school as we knew it is over, and I've noticed a lot of people really struggling to let that go, because they think that we've had this amazing free upbringing, but really we've just been groomed from the beginning in the school system for this very time. And you have to see it in a positive light, because this is what's making us change and stand up. It's not okay anymore, and it's not okay for our children to be, you know, repeating the cycles. So you can look at it both ways. I choose to see the positive.
Right. I see it as a total blessing that actually saved me from indoctrinating my daughter.
Exactly.
You know, like this is actually an opportunity for a huge reset when it comes to how we educate our children.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And like you feel that, right? You feel the opportunity there for those that are awake and aware at this time. Like it's so fertile, that ground, for us to actually return to smaller communities and to return to ancient ways of doing and being. And it is almost like an opportunity for reset, in the positive reset.
Right.
From that perspective, I like that.
Yeah. And you're forced as an adult, as a parent, to actually define your values. And maybe you've never done that, because now that you're responsible for the education of your child, you actually have to ask yourself, like, what matters to us?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. And that's challenging. But it has to happen.
Yeah, it's so true. Like that collective spell has broken to an extent, and now it's like, where do I stand as an individual? What are my unshakable morals and values that, you mean, I'm gonna live and die by, no matter what, no matter how things play out? Where's the boundary, right? We've all had to set harder boundaries as well because of this, and I mean that's a positive thing.
Definitely a lot of inner child healing as well, and breaking those generational cycles. I'm noticing a lot within myself. It's just about being brave at this time. And once again, coming back to that place of knowing and of trust that we weren't taught. We weren't allowed to speak this. We weren't allowed to feel this. You have to be this way. And it's confusing a lot of people, and it's all intertwined, but especially in birth as well. You know, it's undoing those patterns and breaking down those walls that restricts you from being brave and trusting yourself. We don't know, but it's, you know, the fear of the unknown we have to be okay with, and we have to accept. When you're on this authentic path, you know, you're trying to do right by everyone, but it starts from within as well. You know, it's all of breaking down those inner child wounds. So yeah, it's scary, and it's but now's the time to do it, for everyone, for your children, for yourself. Yeah, we deserve that.
Yeah. And what better place to start than birth, right?
Yeah.
Like a natural, empowered home birth would have to be, in my view, the number one beneficial thing that you could offer at this point in time to yourself and to the future generations, you mean, and for your ancestors and for your descendants. Like, making an empowered decision around that is everything.
Well, definitely. With the difference between our two births, I had a 2.5-hour labor at home, and we popped out of the birth pool and straight onto our lounge. So the difference in environment that our two children were brought up in definitely plays a role. You know, the bright lights in a hospital, everyone grabbing you, touching you. The first person to touch you when you're born should be your mother. And that's something every baby deserves. So definitely an empowered home birth can heal all your past births also. So I'm a big advocate for that, having my two polar opposites, whilst I still think my first birth was incredible and amazing, and I learned so much. We're sent what we need at the time. Yeah, you don't be afraid to heal, and don't be afraid for it to be different every time. It doesn't have to be that way that you have known, you know? So, yeah.
Eyla, I remember, I don't know when it was, somewhat recently, you made a post where you said no one except the mother should hold the baby for the first hour. Was it hour, or was it more than that?
Yeah, it was hour.
And I'm curious to know why. Joel's like, fuck that shit. I'm coming in at 45 minutes.
Let's get to skip, bro.
It was more like a boundary that I wanted to create to give the woman permission to decide whatever time she wanted.
Cool.
Right. And so the statement was really like, this is a boundary, this is a framework, and knowing that you can create a framework is the first step. And now you can decide if it's 10 minutes, if it's 30 minutes, if it's 5 hours, if it's however long. Yeah, whatever it is. So that statement was really just to kind of shock the system so that women could think about that a little bit differently. And there was a lot of feedback because some people are like, wow, I felt that, I wanted that, and my baby was taken from me. And I remember, holding my arms up and I just kept repeating, where's my baby? Where's my baby? Women have that experience where the body's like in this euphoria and their brain can't quite rationalize what's going on, So a lot of women did respond with that. At least a dozen women wrote to me about that. So yeah, and like we mentioned before, it's the chemical skin imprinting. There's this window right when the baby comes out. Babies are reliant on smell and sound. So they're looking for anchors like the mother's heartbeat or the father's heartbeat. So if the parents were sleeping in the same bed during the pregnancy, the baby's going to be able to recognize the father's heartbeat out of the womb. The father's voice, the mother's smell. They're not seeing clearly, they're seeing black and white or gray, and they're seeing shapes. So they're not relying on sight. They're not like looking at you and saying, oh, there you are, mom.
Yeah.
It's all smell and sound and sensation, physical sensation. So we really don't want to interrupt that. And there's no need to, unless there's some really, rare emergency and you need assistance. No one else needs to touch the baby. There's a great film called Birth in the Squatting Position. You can find it on YouTube. If you take my class, I have the full length film. It's really amazing. And each woman is catching her baby. She's in a squatting position and she's catching her baby. You do see from time to time, the doctor in the room just kind of having their hand under the head, but not really touching it, just to make sure that the baby doesn't, shoot out, because sometimes they do. Once the shoulders come out, sometimes they really go kind of far. So it's just like a precaution there, just so that it doesn't go flying. But the women really are the ones who have that first interaction. And what I like to encourage people to do is to not cut the cord and leave the placenta and the baby attached. And that's a way to deter anyone from messing around with the baby, because then there's this whole package that they would have to carry. So a way to really ensure that for yourself at the hospital, for example, is to just not cut the cord for however long you don't want people.
And can you talk, can either of you talk about the benefits of not cutting the cord? I know that's something that's done often.
Yeah, well, delayed cord clamping is super beneficial. The baby gets all of its iron, its oxygen, the blood, stem cells, which are really essential. It can also help resuscitate a baby. But what they do, in a hospital, they rip it out or they'll cut it straight away to take the baby away. But you should really be waiting for the cord to go white and to go limp. And all of those essential nutrients are designed for the baby's body at the time of birth. So yeah, delayed cord clamping, I couldn't recommend enough. And like Eyla said, it creates that boundary. Obviously they say, oh, it depends what emergency we're in at the time and things like that. But what they don't know, or they do know, is that it can resuscitate a baby. It's got all of the oxygen that the baby needs. And yeah, I think Eyla did a post, was it Ayla's post recently about delayed cord clamping as well?
Yeah, I mean, so many people ask me about cord blood banking. Do they do that in Australia? Where they extract cord blood immediately after the birth, and then they bank it, and you pay a lot of money every year to have the baby's cord blood banked at some undisclosed location. And in the future, you could potentially use the stem cells to assist with any kind of diseases of the blood, like leukemia or something like that. And so it's this fad, like you walk into the doctor's office and you get close to the end of the pregnancy and they're like, have you considered cord blood banking, right? Because everybody gets a cut, if you sign up, that OB is going to get a cut from that because it's a lot of money. It's a big investment. But the issue with that is I don't think there's enough evidence to show that it's really doing anything. It's a lot of money. I don't know what that cord blood is being used for. I don't know if part of it's being harvested. I have no idea. And what happens is that when you do cord blood banking, you have to clamp the cord immediately. So the baby's not getting all of that life force back to it. All the blood that's in the cord, additional blood that's pumping from the placenta is not going back to the baby. So we see baby with lower blood volume, lower iron levels, and low oxygen count. So when they check the baby's oxygen after the birth, and they're like 80%, they're like, this baby doesn't have oxygen. We need to observe it in the NICU. You're going to have to be there another 2 days until the baby's cleared. So potentially this could be another scenario where it's just more of an opportunity to extract money from insurance companies, right?
Yeah.
So in the situation of resuscitating a baby, if the baby's not breathing and it's been a significant amount of time, particularly in Asia, this has been a practice that's ancient. They would actually put the placenta in hot water and massage it very vigorously to try to move blood and chi back to the baby, and babies would actually become responsive at that point.
Wow.
But what they do in the hospitals is that if the baby's not responsive, they'll immediately clamp the cord, they'll smack it, they'll rub the back, they'll do traditional CPR, mouth to mouth resuscitation, which doesn't really work the same way as it would with a more developed baby or toddler or an adult.
Sure, that's not traumatizing at all. So on top of all that, I'm really curious, like, in terms of more like conventional allopathic practices, when you think of standard practices that go on every single childbirth, what don't you agree with? Like, what do you think shouldn't be done that's being done? Like, whether it's vitamin K shot, whether it's like, et cetera, like, like, where do you go? Like, nah, fuck that shit. I ain't about that life.
Big question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Where do we start?
Yeah.
Let's go everywhere. I mean, now we're going to venture into territory because I obviously want to bring up a topic that is really important and has become more important because that one word that's been on the top of people's tongues for the last like 15 months, that's making people think about them in general is vaccines. So, go wherever you want to go.
I don't know about you, Alyssa, but I get so many people who are like, I'm on a natural birth. I don't want to vaccinate. I don't want vitamin K. I don't want this. I don't want that, but I'm going to go to the hospital just to be safe. So that's like the most common thing that I get. And so for me, it all starts with removing the duality that exists within the woman and within that family dynamic, right? I want this, but I have to do it this way, right? So you're existing in two realities. So it's about removing the duality first, and then from there you can really get to the core of what you want. Because once the woman removes that duality, she's not interested in all of the procedures that the medical industrial complex has to offer. It's almost like she kind of wakes up and says, oh, once I understand that my baby's not inherently ill and I don't need to treat it as such, then I'm kind of freed from this whole situation. And they have a very low intervention birth, because even having a midwife at your birth is considered an intervention.
Yeah.
Right. A non-intervention birth is like going into labor in your house and walking out into your garden alone, squatting and having a baby. That's zero intervention. But you have a midwife there, that's one intervention. Listening to the baby's heartbeat, that's an intervention. I'm not saying it's good or bad, it is what it is, but that is an intervention. So you have to just see where your trust falls in the whole process. And some people have very little trust in the process. So who am I to say what they should and shouldn't do, should or shouldn't do? Me personally, I wouldn't do a free birth. I don't, that's not for me.
What's that?
Free birth is when you have no medical attendant. So you wouldn't have a midwife, you wouldn't have anyone there except whoever you live with, your husband and your home. You can do it anywhere. I think women need to be in a state of complete surrender. I know myself personally, and to be in surrender, I'm not going to be problem solving, and I'm not going to be in the masculine dealing with logistics. That's why I would want a midwife there, and a really hands-off midwife. I wouldn't even want her to check me. I would just want her to like do crossword puzzles in the other room, but it gives me the peace of mind that I don't need to solution a complicated, like what if the baby has shoulder dystocia, right? Baby's shoulder gets stuck on the pubic bone. I don't want to have to worry about finding a solution for that. I want to be in surrender and euphoria and ecstasy, which is what birth can be. So, and from then on, I think all the newborn procedures that are done are hogwash. For me personally, I think it's all just unnecessary. But some of those things help people sleep at night, and that's just where they're at in their
Which procedures are you referring to?
I'm referring to the PKU heel prick, which is looking for an amino acid. I'm referring to vitamin K shot, which is a blood coagulant. I'm referring to the hepatitis B vaccine. I'm referring to even weighing the baby.
Yeah.
I'm referring to anything that would interfere with the baby bonding with the mother. And even cutting the cord at this point, I think I would do a full lotus birth. That is the placenta is the baby's first mother. It's what the baby was looking at in the womb. It's the second sound that the baby was completely enveloped in besides the mother's heartbeat. And so I would personally just allow that to disintegrate on its own through a lotus birth. So I would just do whatever, as far as the newborn procedures go, I would do whatever I would do if I had just myself and the baby out in the woods with no devices. Because I believe in the body's innate intelligence to heal and to regenerate. And I believe in the design.
Yeah.
And real quickly, do you think that maybe why we've moved away from this, or why it's more challenging, or more issues maybe could prop up or come up, is that just in general, we've become so disconnected from nature and our bodies, etc. So it's almost like you definitely need support, as opposed to like maybe 50 or 100 years ago or whatever it is, where you're like walking in the forest and baby just plops out. You know what I mean? Which my mom told me a story that her youngest brother, that like her mom was just like walking up the steps and he just like fell out. So
Well,
I don't know.
I fell out in the car on the way to the hospital.
That explains everything.
That's what I was going to say.
Hey, dude,
Makes sense.
I was so close to making that comment when you were telling us your sob story about your birth, but I held back. So I got you next time.
Well, dude, you can't, bro. You're here for the truth. You gotta pop it.
You're crying though, so that's all right.
Oh, I love it. It's true. It's true.
Vitamin K is an interesting one, because even like a lot of quote unquote anti-vaxxers that I see, they're still like, oh, but the vitamin K shot. It's like, what are you even thinking, But so can you break down vitamin K for us, why it's just simply a no-go and why people need to wake the fuck up around that?
Well, it has a black box warning. So one of the known side effects is death, specifically fetal gasping syndrome, which is basically a seizure of the lungs. And it's a practice that started actually during the knock them out, drag them out era of birth, which was like the 1940s, basically, when women were being knocked out, babies were being dragged out. And so babies were experiencing what I would call violent births. They were being extracted with forceps. They hadn't started using vacuums yet, but they were primarily using forceps. So babies were dealing with a lot of internal bleeding and bruising in the skull. So they had to inject them with vitamin K so that the babies wouldn't hemorrhage after their traumatic birth. So it's a practice that really started because of those violent births that were happening. And then it just became commonplace. And a lot of people choose to circumcise their babies at the hospital after the birth. It's like, let's just get it all done while we're here. Let's just have it on one bill, So if you're choosing to circumcise your child immediately after the birth or within a few days, and it doesn't have its own blood clot factor, I guess you're going to want to take the risk and inject it with vitamin K to make sure that your baby doesn't bleed out. So your options are baby bleeding out, or fetal gasping syndrome, or a host of other potential side effects. And it's misleading because of the word vitamin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but aren't there other options in terms of the injection? Or isn't there like drops or things you could take that don't have aluminum in it?
Yeah, there are oral drops. They say that they're not as effective. I don't know. I don't
Gotcha.
know.
So
I never-
if there is bleeding and a traumatic birth, does the actual vitamin K injection they offer serve a purpose towards preventing blood clotting or helping that issue?
Yeah, so because the baby's blood will not clot on its own,
Yeah.
When people have this concern where they're on the fence about vitamin K, I just present them with that option. And I say, look, if the baby does experience a really traumatic birth,
Yeah.
vacuum, forcep, whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
consider it as an option or don't, and just observe the baby. That's something that you really have to decide, as a parent, where you want to go with the risk. Typically you're not going to encounter that at a home birth. They don't have those tools.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get an episiotomy and your baby extracted with a vacuum at a home birth. So that's another way of decreasing the possibility of having to make that decision.
Yeah, definitely.
Just don't go to the hospital.
Yeah. So I mean, what we're saying is that obviously, but just to nail it in, a home birth is safer than a hospital birth for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, a midwife who's done, say 1,000 births in 20 years, maybe has like a 0.09% C-section rate, meaning 9 of her clients maybe have had life-threatening emergencies that required a C-section. Maybe, this is just a guess based on midwives I know here, whereas an OB has a 60% C-section rate, right? So out of 1,000 women. So that's already telling you like more women are having C-sections with OBs.
Yeah.
Why is that? And people need to understand that with a home birth, you're going to get a risk assessment to even get midwifery care. And if you're high risk by any means, they're not going to accept you into their care. You're just not a candidate. So you've already eliminated possibility of something going wrong based on your health or a medical condition. From there, it's a matter of building endurance, strength, being educated, understanding the process, trusting the process, being in good care, surrendering, and moving forward from there. I've been at 2 transfers in 8 years, and neither of them were life-threatening. I'm not saying that they don't happen. I'm just saying that in my experience, in my small petri dish of a world, it was really only 2 transfers, and they were casual. It was like, we've reached a breaking point and we need to now go to the hospital, right?
Yeah.
Would you consider your transfer an emergency, like a life-threatening emergency, or it was a decision that you made based on how things had lined up so far at that point?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely not an emergency, definitely as a precautionary measure. And
Right.
we pushed it right to the last minute, and we just decided, I gave my consent. I decided what happened to me. So already I didn't want to go to the hospital. Obviously, you have to be flexible in your plans, because it is unpredictable sometimes. So we did decide that just because things weren't moving along, and I was working really hard. So Valley ended up being born with a posterior with a deflex head. So she wasn't coming through the birth canal. So that's what made it tough for me.
Yeah.
And so we're glad that we went, and we're glad we had that experience, and she was born safely. I wouldn't consider it an emergency. And I get that question a lot. I can't have a home birth because what if she bleeds out? And what if and it's always worst case scenario. But when you eliminate those interventions and the spiral of intervention, those risks are dramatically decreased. And your midwife, you most of the time, yes, just go for precautionary measures. You're not rushed into this. But once you're in the hands of the hospital, it could be a different story, and lucky we were there to save your baby.
Right.
But look at all the stuff you did beforehand that caused all of this, It's just about being aware. And coming back to wanting a natural birth, why do you hire a trained surgeon for your natural birth? People I'm talking about an OB, people that have very rarely seen live, natural, undisturbed psychological birth is not someone you should hire if you want a natural birth outcome. So I think that's an important thing for women to think about, because a lot of the time now it's considered a natural birth just coming through the vaginal canal. But when you have intervention, epidural is not part of a natural birth. You know, you're completely drugged, your baby is drugged, you know, all of these things, needles in you, monitoring, all of that is not part of a natural birth. And I know little bits and pieces happen in a home birth, but yeah, women need to really, really, like you said, create the separation between I need this but I need to do it this way because this is what people tell me and this is what I've been taught and this is what people project onto me. And deciding for themselves which direction they want to go and knowing that path. So that's what I help women a lot with, understanding that, you know, questions to ask and things. You're interviewing your birth team. You don't just go to someone and hire those people because they know this way. It's, you have to feel comfortable with those people. You need to feel aligned. They're your friends. They're your best friends at the end of this whole thing. Your midwives are like your mothers. And yeah, so it's a different, you don't just go to an OB's appointment. Oh yeah, we'll do it this way. You know, there's a lot to think about on this journey. And I find it, you know, I see it a lot. You know, people worry about what carrier they're going to have, what pram they're going to get, all the clothes and all the baby's fashion and all of this stuff. But what about how the baby is born and how the baby is brought into this world and how well you are supported at the end of it? Because that's what matters, you know, not what cot they've got and the latest trend, you know. So yeah, it's really deciding the outcome you want, especially during this time. You know, we're setting the precedent.
Yeah,
It would have to be the number one thing that they've perpetuated so much fear around, right? Like most people just don't want to know about the birth process at all. The moment someone's pregnant, they just think they're going to wait 9 months, then there's going to be a blur, something's going to happen. There's this uncertainty, and then they're going to have the baby, and they'll never have to think about that blur transition again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's almost like it's just been whitewashed from us psychologically to the point where like we can't even begin to understand that process and actually being present for that process in any real kind of way.
yeah.
That's fear. That's fear that, you know what I mean? Like how does even like the mothers, like your mother's fear come into that? You know what I mean? Or the mother of the mother that's now birthing, you know what I mean? Like that's obviously passed on as well through that process.
Oh, totally. And we're so dissociated as a society, right? Growing up as children, when we'd experience an event, very rarely was there anyone to help us integrate that and to self-regulate and to co-regulate. No one taught us that. So we just move through the world in this disassociated state. And then when it gets to birth, we just exist in that disassociated and in denial, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to be pregnant for 9 months. There's going to be a blur, like you said, and now I'm going to have this like accessory. And then from there, I'm also going to figure out a way to not really integrate into that either, because it's a lot to face when you're raising a child, because everything that you grew up with, your relationship with your parents, your relationship to self is called into question and you're confronted by it. And that's what child rearing is. And that's a tough pill to swallow. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're coming, you know, to the end. We can keep talking a bit, but there's a couple of subjects that I want to hear your opinions on. First off, vaccines. Yes, no, maybe. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And also, from your experience, how much do pediatricians actually know about vaccines? How much education do they get in medical school on the subject?
Oh, I'm just going to say it. No, a definite not. I trust myself. I trust my immune system. I trust my baby's body. I trust the fact that we've been given everything we've ever needed. And I don't tamper with that process. I think it's a very dangerous thing. I have done lengthy research into this topic, and mostly I think people just need to believe mothers and families and people that have suffered from the adverse reactions and death of their family from these weapons. I urge everyone to question and know where they stand on this, so that, you know, in your vulnerable state, you can't be separated, and no one can interfere with your family unit. I think that's one thing Joel and I did going into our first birth. You know, we were armed with that. But question everything. No, pediatricians, most doctors don't know the ingredients in that needle. They don't. And I think the information out there is confusing, it's misleading, it's very skewed in the way of the medical industry. It is a money-making scheme, and we simply don't need it. I'm just going to say it. It causes more problems than any benefits. And anyone who's ever been vaccinated is technically injured. So I'm assuming we are all vaccine injured, and that's where disease stems. So yeah, if you understand that, I think you would really question it. Things like vitamin K, vitamin is a definite misleading word. And I get that question a lot. What about this? What about that? I think it's trusting the process, trusting that your baby is born with everything that they need. I help women a lot to overcome the fear and stand in their power when they're being pressured and coerced into these decisions. I think it's important to reiterate to every woman that they need to stand in their power and to trust that inner knowing and that intuition. Because most of the time when people come to me, they're like, I don't feel like I want to do this, or I'm being very pressured by my OB, or this and that. And especially with the COVID vaccine now affecting, they're saying that it's, you know, going to affect women, pregnant women and their babies on a large scale. It's creating that extra layer of fear, something they didn't have to consider before. And it's untested, especially specifically this COVID vaccine. It's not tested. And I saw something the other day, it's written in plain sight, but we just need to know where to look. The final testing won't be done till 2025. So are you being a lab rat for these governments that are just testing this on you and your baby? I don't think so. That's not okay with me. And it's not okay with a lot of people, but they just don't know how to word it and work their way around it and get out of this. You know, you're placed with a lot of pressure and a lot of fear at every single turn. And it shouldn't be that way.
Well,
so,
no vaccine's been properly tested during pregnancy, right?
That's
my knowledge. Is that correct, Eyla?
Yeah, there none.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that I recently learned about in the last few months were all of the Chinese human studies. They're called CHS, where the Chinese, before they were bought out by pharma in the 90s, did a this whole lengthy process on examining fetal tissue after it had been exposed to ultrasound technology. So I don't doubt that somewhere we could probably find similar testing with vaccinations that the Chinese were doing independently, because it seems like as I uncover this more, I'm finding out that a lot, it was women who were actually intending to have a miscarriage subjected themselves to these studies. An abortion. They were intending to have, I always confuse the two because they were intending to have an abortion. So they decided to subject themselves to these studies. They signed up for them. And so I'm finding out that they were doing pharmaceutical studies on pregnant women. Obviously the babies never went full term. They just simply studied the fetal tissue after the baby had been aborted. So maybe there's something there, but yeah, as far as vaccines now in the US and in Europe and Australia, I imagine that there are no studies that I've come across.
Yeah.
But you will hear many OBs say, you're pregnant, get the DTaP shot, then you're going to pass the immunity to your baby. And then once the baby's out, the pediatrician's saying, now the baby needs to get the DTaP shot. And then the women are saying, but I got it during pregnancy. I was told it was going to get passed to the baby. And they're like, well, now it's weakened and you have to do it again. So it's like women are just being corralled like cattle through this process. And again, like birth interventions, the fentanyl, the lidocaine that's in the epidural, all of those interventions, it's just creating another cash cow for pharma, which is what vaccines are doing, just creating a very sick population that they can rely on to continue producing revenue.
Mhm.
I find that, well, just on that is, you blatantly give your trust. You're expected to give your trust to someone that doesn't know the ingredients, but women are advised not to drink coffee. Women are advised not to take regular painkillers during pregnancy. You can't even eat certain nutrient dense foods that would help your pregnancy flourish and your baby thrive. But injecting it straight into your body, like that's not going to cross the placenta as well. It's very confusing and conflicting information. I do urge people to think critically and make those decisions for themselves, but stand in their power. You are the only advocate for you and your family and your baby. No one else really, really cares as much as you ever will. So I think that's important to remember. It's your responsibility.
Yeah. And Yerasimos, you asked about how much training do pediatricians really have in immunology? Not very much. It's like they study it for one semester unless they're going to go specifically into immunology. But one of the, I know many pediatricians here in Miami, and one of them is actually a family friend. And he's like, yeah, I mean, honestly, I really shouldn't be the one administering these, like he really feels that way. And he actually expressed to me a few years ago that the health department comes in to audit his office and all pediatricians' offices, and they'll just go through random files of patients and they'll see who has been vaccinated according to the CDC schedule and who hasn't. And if there's a certain amount of patients that haven't been, that practice could get flagged and closed down and they could no longer practice. So they're in a situation where they have to peddle these vaccines in order to stay afloat and keep their livelihood. So I think at a certain point, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Yeah. They've made a commitment, right, to Rockefeller medicine. So
I mean, that's been my experience through my years of investigation, is that MDs, they don't get the proper education, the proper education in toxicology, the proper education in adverse events, and what to notice. That's the big thing. Even with VAERS, VAERS isn't, unfortunately, in the US, it's the best we got, but it's not a great system, and from my experience, there was a study, I think it was 11 years ago, where they came to the conclusion that less than 1% of adverse events were even reported, and that information was sent to the CDC, and the CDC just kind of ignored it. And so there was an opportunity to overhaul the system to be able to, monitor what's going on with these shots, and it just kind of fell by the wayside, and that's just a shame. It's. Yeah. And even with VAERS, people don't even know many people don't even know what that is. I think they know now more so because of this whole COVID thing, and people talk about it more. For years, people had no clue. Nurses don't know about it. Doctors don't know about it to a certain degree. So anyways, just curious to need your thoughts on all that.
And that less than 1% has resulted in $4 billion being paid out, or 4 billion plus, you mean? Imagine if that was an actual 1% or 50% or 60%, right?
Yeah.
And what is it now? I think in Australia, we're talking about 72 doses before the age of 18.
Same level. Here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's just about having the choice. It shouldn't be like Eyla said about vitamin K, it may be necessary in some instances, but it's knowing and discerning for yourself when you feel that necessary. I don't think it should be applied to every single case, because every single birth and every single situation is not the same. So I think it's about having full, transparent information, and being able to make your own choices about what you put into your body and into your baby.
Mm-hmm. And that's where that's one of the main conversations we're dealing with right now. is, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I'm cool with the person making whatever choice they want to make. You know,
Yeah.
if you feel safer by following the schedule, then, you know, you're free to do that. I personally wouldn't. And you know, that's the challenge we're facing and that parents are facing, you know, in California, you know, your child can't even go to school unless they're following certain protocols.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's where it gets to be a little like sketchy, slippery slope, where I'm like, no, like, if I want to do this, cool. If not, then I should have the right to do that.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, and it just gets difficult when we reach that point, because people who consciously choose to vaccinate are expecting everyone else to, because they believe in germ theory,
Mhm.
and they believe it's really just this dyad of a belief system, you know. And so when people say, like, you need to do this, like all of pandemic, it's like all I hear, it's like, you need to do this to protect other people, you know. It's like in the US, that is like the liberal slogan of the left. It's like, to protect others, you have to vaccinate yourself, and it becomes this like social justice thing. And it's not a matter of that. You know, we would first have to both believe in the same thing to even have this conversation, and we just don't. Like,
Yeah.
I don't believe in communicable disease,
Yeah.
but most people do. So that's really where the rub lies.
Yeah, that's my whole thing too, is that, like, I'm not even playing in the same sphere. We can't even have the same conversation. Even some of these MDs and PhDs that are like questioning the vaccine, but then they're making their arguments still under the guise of germ theory. And so for me, I'm like, okay, well, you know, most people are playing in that field, so I still on some level applaud that these people are speaking out. But then for me, I'm like, but I'm not, we're just playing a completely different game. Like, I can't go there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would first have to believe that this is actually going to come into my body and harm me to even get into this conversation about vaccinations with you. So that's really where it is. It's like a fundamental philosophical difference.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Well,
Yerasimos, I know you got that question ready, mate.
well, yeah. I mean, let's just finish it off with this, which is, you know, Eyla, you and I have had conversations on this, and this is an issue that Joel, you and I have spoken about, and it's something that's really near and dear to my heart, and has brought plenty of emotions up for me. And it's the topic of circumcision. And so, why is that something that's still being done? Like, just fucking talk to me. Like, why are we mutilating our baby boys?
It's part of the fear matrix again, you know. And it's also it's mimicry, and what in biology what we call mimicry, right? Where if we don't do something that everyone else is doing, we'll be ostracized and we'll be thrown out in the cold and we'll die, right? So it's just this fear of not belonging as well. And I've had numerous clients, I don't know about you, Alyssa, but because it's maybe different in Australia, but
it is, yeah.
They'll say to me like, oh, we're going to do it because my husband, you know, whatever his name is, you know, he's circumcised, and he just really doesn't want our son to look different than him. And we don't, you know, it's like, how's he gonna, he doesn't know how to clean, he has no hygiene for an uncircumcised penis. So it's like, what are we gonna do? I'm like, really? You know,
that's the reason to generally mutilate your child.
So I get that. You know, I have religious clients as well who are Jewish. You know, I don't touch the subject of religion. I don't debate it with them. It's not where I'm going to go. But for people, everyone else who's doing it for, you know, well, I thought that's what you do. What do you mean? It's dirty, right? So then there's education that has to happen around hygiene, around germs, around understanding that the function and the important role that foreskin plays in not only his health, but the health between him and his partner once he becomes sexually active. So there's education that the mother has to do. It's her responsibility, the father's responsibility. There's like ego at play. And there's also all the conditioning that we have from pornography, where we're just watching these, you know, circumcised penises and these like cleanly shaven, hairless vulvas interact. And that's what we grow up thinking that it's supposed to look like and be like and feel like. So there's so much that's informing this. And then of course, you know, you have the doctor who's like, oh, when are we scheduling the circumcision?
Mm-hmm. Do you, from my experience or my research, that parents usually aren't in the room while this is happening? Like, unless it's like religious, like obviously during a bris or something, but like in the hospital, they're not like rolling up in there while the baby's being placed in the torture chamber, the torture, whatever it's called, the little straps being put on, and then, you know, the whole thing goes on. Or am I mistaken?
The worst part is that they don't want to be in the room because they know what they're doing. They don't, I've heard people say, I don't want to hear the baby scream. I don't want to see it. So you're subjecting your child to this and you're not even accepting responsibility for it.
No.
They know.
So you're
So-
giving your baby away to go be surgically tampered with and mutilated, and then you're leaving that baby alone to deal with a choice that you've made on behalf of that baby, and then simply choosing not even to be there as a support for a decision which you made for another being to that is harmful to them. Like, that's just unconscious beyond comprehension.
And then it gets worse because people will say, he was so good, he didn't even cry.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's called
He-
shock.
Yeah.
Disassociation. He fell asleep.
Yeah, if he passed out, oh, he's sleeping now. And then what happens is the baby gets home and, you know, it's in a wet diaper where it's pooping, it's peeing, and it's in moisture, and people are not using cloth diapers, which I don't recommend disposable diapers, but that's a whole other conversation. And so they're in these disposable diapers sitting in their urine. How is this ever supposed to heal? And every time they're lying on their bellies, they're uncomfortable. They try to breastfeed on their mothers and it's uncomfortable to be on her abdomen because it's putting pressure on the site where the foreskin was removed. And then women are wondering why their babies can't breastfeed. And then they have to supplement with formula. You know, it goes into this whole spiral effect, and no one is making the connection that it's because there was a genital mutilation that took place. And they'll just say, well, the baby just didn't like breast milk. I just had to bottle feed it. Bottle feeding was easier because it didn't have to put pressure on its penis to breastfeed. You know,
It's disturbing to me. It gets me angry. I mean, you know, there's a book called Circumcision, the Hidden Trauma by Dr. Ronald Goldman. You have it on your desk. There you go.
really good time over here.
And I believe it was up until the 80s that the kind of standard understanding amongst medical professionals were that babies don't feel pain. Is that correct? Like they didn't feel pain. Like, so yeah, it's okay. We can do this. They're not, don't worry about it. They don't feel it, or they won't remember it, or whatever the case may be.
I have to interject for just a moment. The Chinese human studies I was telling you about, where they observed fetal tissue after the abortion, they've noticed elevated cortisol levels that should not exist in that aborted tissue, which would lead you to believe that even a baby at 12 weeks, 6 weeks is feeling pain from the abortion.
Wow.
So they do feel pain.
Yeah, it's just mind blowing.
So sorry, I just had to like throw that in there because it's
please.
Relevant.
Yeah.
It's so relevant. And there was a article.
Sorry.
No, I was saying there's an article that was going around where I think this nurse, she worked in the hospital. She didn't want to circumcise, but the husband was adamant. So she decided to volunteer her child for a study where they did brain scan on the baby before circumcision, during it, and after it, and that they found out that like the structure of the brain changed, and that a month later they tested it again and it had remained changed. So it's like alteration to brain activity that perhaps is permanent. I don't know, but it was only a one-time thing. I don't know if they like line people up. Let's try to do this study multiple times. I'm not fully aware of that, but again, the repercussions of that, we don't know.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, just to close it off, like what is the whole it's cleaner? Where is that even coming from? Is that simply because you don't have to clean that skin anymore? Like I don't understand that. Even from a religious point of view, isn't there MO that it's cleaner? Isn't that like, I'm not sure if we can just clarify that.
So the big idea is that it prevents the spread, or it lowers the probability of spread of sexually transmitted diseases or infections, and that smegma, which is what can build up under the foreskin, doesn't have an opportunity to build up, and there are no opportunities for yeast infections to build up. So yeast infections come from the gut. People just need to understand that first and foremost, in both men and women. And so there's just a gross misunderstanding of it's a symptom of a larger issue within the body, and it's being expressed on the penis. It's not because of the foreskin. So it's just like a disconnect. And the education that happens around that, most birth classes don't talk about circumcision. They don't talk about foreskin. They don't talk about they don't teach anyone how to clean the child's foreskin. So that's something that's really lacking. I decided to go rogue with my own type of childbirth education method because I wanted to talk about vaccines. I wanted to talk about circumcision. I wanted to talk about placentas, and I wanted to talk about the father's role in this whole process. And I wanted to use the word man, and I wanted to use the word woman freely. So I designed my own process, my own system, because it's the most common cosmetic surgery in America is circumcision.
There's a whole industry around it too. They sell that shit off. Like, yeah, let's put a little face cream on. Yeah,
Yeah.
Is this the third part of the podcast where we go into the Illuminati? I'm just wondering.
I don't know. We'll bring you back, and we could talk about that for sure. Part 3. That'll be for our top tier members of patrons. So
platinum.
Yeah, for our philosophers, for all you philosophers out there, we're gonna go deep into the Illuminati and reasons behind circumcision. And anyways, well, listen, this has been an amazing dialogue. Really, thank you both so much for coming on. I know we tapped a bunch of different issues here.
Yeah. Before we close off, I want to ask each of you. We'll start with you, Alyssa. If you got one message to a woman who is considering a decision at this time, who is, I guess, new to this information, what would you say to that person?
First and foremost, that you have everything that you need within you already to achieve anything that you desire. Don't question yourself. Find that place within yourself where your knowing and your intuition, it's calling out to you every turn that you make. And it's vital, especially in this field with birthing, with mothering, and definitely in motherhood. It changes the way that you mother. It changes how you perceive the world and what you take on and absorb from the world. So definitely do your own research, become educated and informed, and know where to look and speak to people that are aligned with you. I think it's super important just to understand that we were born to do this. We were designed for this. Our body is not a lemon. You have everything that you need already. You are deeply connected with your baby. Your baby knows exactly what to do, and you don't need saving. So I think it's really important to really find those places within yourself that brings you back to that, and doing all of the healing. And I mean, motherhood's another level. I think it definitely transforms you in a way you could have never imagined. And so many things pop up, inner child wounds and things you start recognizing as you're mothering your own children. So starting on that journey is essential. Don't be scared, be brave, because you were born for this, and you were born for this time, and your baby was born for this time. So yeah.
Nice. Eyla, closes off you.
I want to echo what you said, that everything you have is already within you. And if there's ever been an opportunity for reclamation, it's now.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's this, and it's going to look different for everyone. And just remember that I know we feel very isolated right now. We feel very polarized, but there are so many people who are wondering the same thing that you are wondering, and they're looking for a doorway. So reach out to people, start looking around, asking questions, taking the temperature here and there, and follow your bliss, truly. That's where the answers are.
Yes.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, speaking of reaching out to people, how can people reach out to you or find you? Or do you have any courses coming up, projects, etc.? Share your information. I mean, we'll have it in our show notes too, but you know.
Yeah, I'm always doing online birth classes. Live on Zoom. I do them one-on-one. I do individual coaching sessions. I can help people build birth plans. You know, I can offer doula support wherever you are. You can find me on Instagram, Telegram, my website. Yeah.
Cool. We'll have all of those listed below.
Lisa?
Yeah, definitely. Instagram, mindfulandhome_. I am offering doula support also via Zoom because unfortunately we cannot offer in-hospital support at this time. Things are very restricted here in Australia. So I am offering my gift and my services to anyone who has a question, who is seeking more information. I can point you in the right direction if that's what you feel called to do. So I'm sure Eyla and definitely me, we'd love to connect and help you.
Yeah.
Because you deserve that. Birth is not a scary thing. Birth is amazing. Birth is so incredible. It's euphoria, and it just makes all the difference to be surrounded by good people who know the way, who have experienced this, and there is a better way than what you've been taught. There is a better way than all the fear that you carry. And yeah, super passionate about it, obviously.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's been such an honor to share this space with the two of you for the past 2 hours and have this vital conversation, which more conversations need to be had around this topic. Super privileged to know you both and to share this information and this dialogue. And I'm proud to be here, truly, and proud to put this out. Everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Here for the Truth. This has certainly been a paradigm shattering episode, and that's what our MO is. That's why we're here, and these are the conversations which, you mean, we want to keep having. Everyone that supports and listens to this podcast, we really, really appreciate you, and we'll see you all next time. Take care.
Bye.
Smoking mirrors, I'm seeing through the illusion. Waking up in a time they think you're in a delusion. Somebody set the alarms, cause they be too busy snoozing. I'm in a DeLorean.